We're gonna pretend like we're in a theater. Hey, everybody, we're at a movie theater. We're gonna just put ourselves there right now. As we're all coming together, I'm gonna do our land acknowledgement, and I am gonna base this in San Luis Obispo, even though some of us are in different spaces. But because this festival is coming to you from there, I'm gonna do that from where I think many of you are. Somebody playing some music, we're gonna ask you to, mute that so that we do appreciate it. But that was Stefan. I think that might have been Stefan. Hey, Stefan, we see you. Okay. So I am doing the land acknowledgement, so please respectfully mute yourselves so that you can hear this important acknowledgement. We acknowledge that tonight's or today's, this even early, late afternoon's event takes place on unceded ancestral lands of the indigenous people of San Luis Obispo County, the Chumash people, who are the past, present, and future stewards of this land. The SLO Film Festival will continue to use its platform to showcase indigenous storytelling and honor the beautiful land on which we gather. Please visit native-land.ca to learn more about the indigenous land you are living on. And we encourage you always to be aware of the land that you are living on or visiting. And so, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power of Media to promote social justice. I am so honored and proud to be with this panel. My name is Fanchon Cox, and I've done quite a few panels with the Diversity Council there in San Luis Obispo. I brought my one-woman show there, One Drop of Love, for high school students. I've done that virtually now, as well as in person, obviously more than a year ago. And I was thrilled to be asked by Sky and by Grace to host this panel today with these, I'm gonna cuss because I know we skew older, so I'm gonna say with these badass activists and journalists on our panel today. So I'm gonna quickly run through their bios, and then we will do I'll ask them some questions for a bit, and then we'll do an open Q&A. In the Q&A, you can either put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and let us know that you want to ask a question, and we'll bring you on. So our first lovely guest today is Alisa Heraldo, and she is a photojournalist and documentarian in San Luis Obispo. She grew up in the Bay Area and holds her BS in child development and her MA in counseling psychology. I love those things. I like people who study those things. They tend to be really cool and nice people and caring. Okay, I'm not gonna comment on everyone's bio, I promise. Alisa studied photojournalism in San Francisco and worked at ETC magazine as both a photographer and photo editor. In 2020, Alisa and her husband Stefan founded Community Roots Project. We're gonna learn more about that today, a journalistic platform that fosters community through visual storytelling and activism. Alisa's passion is to tell stories that focus on marginalized groups in small communities and to create spaces for people to be in community with one another. Please welcome Alisa. Just wave to everybody so they know who you are. Okay. And next we have Lord Sanctus. He's from Nipomo, I think I got that right, California. He's a CEO, producer, songwriter, MC, and futurist, and he spends his day highlighting talented creators from the Central Coast of California. He's an artist, songwriter, producer, and his work has been heard in such films and television shows as Despicable Me 2, How to Make Money Selling Drugs, Transformers 4, On My Block, The Ellen DeGeneres Show, and much more. And we will be hearing about his organization, Connect the Coast, today as well. Karen, and say hello, Lord Satan. I think you don't even need an introduction. Everybody knows you, but okay. Next, we have Karen Garcia. She covers North San Luis Obispo County, local government, social justice, and immigration issues for New Times SLO. She joined the editorial team in 2016 after contributing several articles to the local NPR affiliate KCBX. Karen is a Southern California native and earned degrees from El Camino Community College and California Polytechnic State University. Hello, Karen. Okay, and finally, we have the woman who I believe is responsible for bringing us all together. She is an amazing activist, and you all are so lucky that she is in your community. In 2016, Courtney Hill co-founded Race Matters, a grassroots organization that amplifies matters of racial justice and centers Black voices. Now their executive director, she has been a driving force for Race Matters, creative endeavors, cultural programs, and special events. Courtney is a producer on SLO Film Fest, yes, on the selection, restrictions apply. Oh, I gotta see it, I promise I will. About San Luis Obispo's history of housing discrimination and programmed the shorts program, short films, and big stories. So make sure you see those. I think you still have an opportunity to. Hello, everybody. Hi, panelists. So like I said, we're going to start with some questions from me, and then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A from the community. And I know we're all expecting a good, solid, robust conversation around social justice and how we can use media to kind of promote that. So my first question for all the panelists, and as I ask, feel free to ask each other or just kind of have a conversation around this. And so whoever wants to jump in first, my first question is, as we're centering this conversation around the power of the media to promote social justice, and each of you were involved in some way in the protests during the summer, which doesn't at all give it all the context we need, but I'm gonna presume that everyone on this call is aware of what I mean when I say the protests of the summer. And then as each of you talk, if you want to give more details. Can you give us each a brief overview of your own involvement during those protests, especially as it pertains to media? Whoever wants to jump in, or I will call on you if y'all are quiet.
I'll jump in. My role in the protests are that May 31st, I organized a rally in Mitchell Park, and Harold actually performed, and it was organized in a day. So like the morning before, there were some people writing into Race Matters, asking if something would be done for George Floyd. And after a few days of just feeling so tired and that I just wasn't ready to take on that labor, some folks of color started writing in too, and I was like, okay, like I do feel a responsibility to just give people space and a voice. And it was, definitely in the pandemic, and it was a risk in terms of being still at grassroots, but an organization maybe heading towards the mainstream and blatantly like asking people to gather. And then we kept doing, well, we'll talk about that later about gathering. But so that was the first large rally that did turn into a march. There was a lot of police presence that day. But a week or the Thursday before, I do want to say that Tiana, Joe, Leana, I think like 12 folks had gathered in downtown SLO for the first action. And so it was definitely a youth-led movement from the start. But that was my role. And then the protest, there was a very eventful one the next day on June 1st, and they definitely continued. And so my role there was just a participant, a marcher, following the leads of the youth, and then also wanting to bear witness and to what was actually happening, because it was just a crazy time with a lot of misinformation and just this new protest movement really in San Luis Obispo, where we hadn't seen people take the streets, at least I hadn't, and not that often, and in that way. And so I think a lot of people were scrambling to make sense of it. And so it was definitely a time when the media as well were reaching out, wanting to know who was who and what was happening. And so it was interesting navigating all of that, as well as with wanting to keep people safe and what do you and what don't you broadcast and tell people and tell the media. And so in a nutshell, that was my role.
Thank you so much. And Karen, maybe you can talk about your role since you're kind of the media professional here.
Thank you. Well, so as a part of New Times, it was myself and 2 other colleagues. That's our big news team. We tag team a lot, whether it was on social media or it was being present at the protests or the demonstrations, and really just trying to not do stories right then and there, because we come out every Thursday. So we have the opportunity to take a second. We can be there in the moment, and then the next day reach out to people, reach out to participants that were in attendance, reach out to organizers or people who we thought might know organizers, such as Courtney. I know she got a lot of emails from me, so thanks for your patience, Courtney. And just trying to understand and get a feeling for what the community was feeling. This was, as Courtney said, this was a time that everyone was feeling, had a lot of emotions and had a lot to say and wanted to be heard. So this was a time for us as reporters to not, again, for New Times, just to take a moment, have a feel for what was going on, be there, take notes, reach out to people, and see the bigger picture. It wasn't just a protest, it wasn't just a demonstration, but what is the bigger picture? What is the bigger meaning? What is our local movement wanting to voice or wanting to figure out, express? And so that's kind of the role that I felt that I played, was taking a step back, recording what was happening, and again, looking at the bigger picture and putting it to words for the community to read and dissect themselves. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's how I felt that I played the role in.
Awesome, Karen. Thank you. So we can see how kind of these 2 different roles, one in a professional capacity and the other in a kind of self-decision, the way you committed yourself, Courtney, for better and worse for you, to doing this. And so people knew to immediately reach out to you. And Alisa, how about you?
Yeah, so my husband and I just recently founded our Community Roots Project, and our goal has always been to tell stories in the community, intimate stories, and we wanted to focus on marginalized.
La canta más, just because.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. So we always wanted to tell stories of marginalized groups or marginalized people, all different people of color, because we believe that representation matters, and we weren't really seeing that representation in SLO, which is why we were hesitant to move back. So we thought, okay, if we're going to move back, then we need to do something to help with the underrepresented community. So yeah, when it came time to the protests, our experience is in photojournalism and photography. And for some reason, I just envisioned using video, kind of doing like moving portraits. And I'd never done video before. So I just like had my husband help set that up for me on the camera. And I went out there, and after spending time realizing that the people who are emerging at the front of the protests, of the movement locally, needed to be humanized, because I think people were putting them on pedestals, and the danger in doing that is then separating yourself from those people, because oh, they know what they're doing, they've got a story to tell, they can handle it, and then you begin to like seem like they're better than you. And yeah, so all the implications there. And I thought, I definitely want to show that these leaders, Tiana specifically, is a person and is a well-rounded person. And we contacted a couple of the leaders and started to film them, because they're so gracious in letting us invade their lives in a very intimate way. And so we started to post little clips of that from the inside, like what was happening from the very inside of the protest, the very, like literally standing in the middle of it and getting footage, and also from the inside intimately with these individuals, and then using my husband's graphic design skills to share information and tell these stories in a beautiful, simple, digestible way. So that's how we've been involved so far.
Awesome. So you're really allowing for the people that are involved to kind of express their own voices through these videos you're making. And we see this contrast / parallels already between what Karen does kind of on a professional and traditional level of media versus what you did, Elisa, which is like, we're just going to create this organization and go out and share these stories. And so I can't wait to hear more about how all of these end up influencing your community and therefore the world, because others get access to that. Awesome. All right, Lord Sanctus, tell us your perspective, please.
I think it starts when just before I had moved here, maybe like 2016, like right when Trump had got elected. That's when I started really paying attention to politics, like most people probably in my generation. And when I started really paying attention, just all these kind of political songs started flowing out of me, and I didn't really do that. That wasn't really my thing, and I had no idea where these songs were going to land and what they were going to be used for. And as these protests started to happen, I started to see that, oh, this is what they're for. You know what I'm saying? So all of a sudden I had a platform to really kind of speak my mind. And I had an engine to drive that, which was Connect the Coast. And then I just wanted to use that engine as kind of an unelected historian to kind of document what was going on. Because I just knew, I had told all my friends when I saw Trump get elected, I was like, regardless of what happens, I know for a fact we're in the midst of history. And like in the 80s, I was a baby, so I didn't know really what was going on. And I was kind of I was there in hip hop's infancy and around a lot of things that were happening, but A, there wasn't really ways to document what was going on, and B, I wouldn't really know what to document at that age. And so I just felt so adamantly that I was going to be witnessing so much history that I was going to try to document as much of it as I could from the perspective of the youth. Not that I'm one of them, but that I just speak their language and can kind of maybe
You just talked about being born in the 80s, and I'm like, you young, you a youth.
I don't feel
I will confirm you are a youth, but wise for your age, we'll say. I love how in your case and Elisa's case, we're also taking what traditional media looks like, which tends to be text heavy, right? Which tends to be, and necessarily so, but in both your cases, you're taking this creative spin on it, right? You're looking at music and song, and Elisa, you're looking at your photography, just even aesthetically, and how that fits into a broader way of storytelling. And then Courtney, you're kind of bringing everyone together through your activism and having this point of reference. So again, I am honored. Yes, Lord.
Just say that I feel like I'm coming from maybe me and Elisa might be two different sides of the same coin, in the sense that growing up here, especially in the 80s and 90s, they made it a point to make you feel so unseen. And then when I moved back and talking to the kids out here, hearing how unseen they felt, I knew how important it was to make them feel like superstars. And so I definitely hear and I agree with what Elisa says when she says, you don't want to idolize these people to the point where you think they're doing something you can't do. But also, it's very important when you know how it feels to be unseen to kind of make people feel seen. And so that in a way that they haven't been seen before.
I love it. And I think it speaks so clearly to the title of this, the power of media, is what you're both saying is a way to uplift those whose voices have not been represented or who don't feel like they have any place in the media. And so I love that. So my next question is around what has changed, what has remained the same since the summer, and kind of have you seen the ways that you participate in media helped move towards change, or have you felt stuck even though you had these kind of goals around how you were going to use the media towards change? Maybe Courtney, do you want to start? Or
Yeah,
even if
yeah,
just
sure. One thing
any
I'll start with a positive, something that has changed that's been amazing to see, and it's kind of going off what Harold is saying about who is centered in the narrative here and who is seen. I love the way that we've seen these young Black folks just unapologetically take up space and claim space. And there was a moment there was a huge NAACP rally in March that that Race Matters supported. And I remember that we had a couple of the youth speak, Tiana and Jalen, I believe it was. And so that was like, okay, speakers come up to the podium type of thing. But then like one by one, little trickles, all the young Black folks, including like the Cal Poly football player's child who was maybe 10 years old or something like that, just started walking up the stairs like, this is about us, this is our space. And there was no question to whether they belonged there. And seeing that is a moment, and there have been so many moments, and some that are more both traumatic, joyful, and flashy than that one. But there was something about that, seeing just the confidence with taking up that space, and the joy and the music and the dancing that has been a part of the protests and rallies. And really what I've noticed observing, I can be a quiet observer a lot of the time, but every now and then I'm just like, they just need space to be Black. Like there's all the policy talks, and the policy maybe hasn't moved as far as some would like, and there's still some frustrations there, and I think a disconnect with the policy and the government side of things. But in terms of the cultural change, it really comes down in a way to space and the youth's confidence, seeing when they do feel like they belong, and like what Harold spoke to about feeling unseen. That's all really profound to me.
Beautiful. Elisa, do you have any thoughts on changes that you've seen since then?
Yeah, the protest itself with that change, in those moments, I felt really hopeful. It was like Courtney said, it was a whole new side of SLO. And Stefan and I have been so fortunate to have gotten to work with prominent people in the community, businesses, organizations, and individuals. And when everything started to happen, we kind of went like, oh crap, like we need to think better about who we're working with and who we're collaborating with. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just really hope everyone's on the right side here. And so the change that I saw was that 99% of the people we have worked with came out and spoke out for Black lives. A lot of business owners in downtown that we worked with put stuff in their windows and kept it up a really long time. So people were starting to speak out where they haven't spoke out before. Of course, it cannot feel like overdue, but it was really cool to see that there are people in this community that who are willing to step up and speak out, and they continue to do that and continue to be involved. So that's, the numbers have shrunk down on that, but there still are really committed people. And where there hasn't been change is where we still have a long way to go, I think would be in the leadership in the county. We're not seeing change, but we are seeing people put pressure, and that's cool to witness. And just, I hope we continue with that momentum and keep applying pressure and seeing that we have the power to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll definitely get to a place where we'll talk about how anybody on the call, what action steps we might be able to do moving forward, both to support your work and also to support kind of these larger goals you have for change in SLO. Karen and Lord Sanctus, I'll add a question so you could either answer the previous question around what you've seen change and then also if you want to talk about what can the media do differently. So especially when we look at what hasn't changed, what are things that you would like to see the media do differently so that change is happening? So Karen, I'll ask you first.
I think I want to echo what Elisa was just saying. The pressure is there. We saw it increase, we saw it stay, we saw it grow. We saw a lot of community support around it. And again, from a reporter's point of view, we saw a lot of support for it. And we also saw a lot of backlash and a lot of negative. And we reported on both. I think that we tried our best. We had countless hours of conversation in person, and when we couldn't be in person, it was on Slack and it was through text message. You know, how do we approach shining a light on what's happening, but making sure that, again, taking a step back, what's the big picture? Who is everyone that has something to say about this? And I think in terms of change, I would say the same thing. Again, from a reporter standpoint, there's an issue here that has been brought up by the community, by the movement, by conversations, and that still haven't been addressed. And in terms of what the media can do differently, I think one of the challenges, at least personally, that I've faced is trust with the people that participated, trust with organizations. Even if I reach out to someone, it doesn't mean that they'll talk to me. So being able to build that trust with people, and at least for me, when I always start an interview, especially with a really hard, sensitive topic, maybe not sensitive, but just a really passionate subject, such as the Black Lives Matter movement, or just the issues that people have felt in this community, I always try to start my interviews by saying, I'm not here to exploit your story. I'm not here to exploit your feelings. I'm not here to use you for a focal point of a story. I'm here to hopefully provide you a space. We're going to have this interview. I want it to be a conversation. This isn't just a Q&A. I'm not here to berate you with questions. I want you to feel as comfortable as possible with me. And when you don't, stop. Tell me to stop. And from there, I hope to, again, as part of New Times, create a platform for all the different voices. But when I speak to someone, or when I interview someone, I want to give them that space. So, I hope the thing that changes is the trust. I know, I completely understand where it comes from. I completely understand the issue with different news media outlets. I get it. And I think New Times, in a way, tries really hard, again, to be that community forum. And in that sense, I always hope to continue gaining the trust of individuals in the county, community groups, organizations. But that is the challenge, I think, is building that trust and, letting someone know, I'm not here to use you. I'm not here to use your story. I'm here to learn about how you feel. I'm here to give you a platform to talk about it and share it with the community if you want to. And that way people learn. I think that we're so in our own worlds and in a bubble, especially last year, so many of us opened up our minds and our hearts to everyone. And I think that the more we share, hopefully, the more we learn from one another. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Lord Sanctus. So any thoughts on what the media can do differently? And then since Karen brought up this idea of trust, are there things that the media can do to help, especially, we've all here talked about the youth, and we've talked about them in the chat and how important those voices are. And so they often, rightfully so, are mistrusting of everybody, but particularly those who have now spent a lot of their lives with Donald Trump as a president and all these questions around what truth is. So Lord Sanctus, I'm curious if you have thoughts on how to help young people or anybody, any of us on this panel, be more trusting of media, what the media needs to do for us to feel more trusting.
That's what I was gonna say. But I think that, well, I do want to address you talking about what I've seen change first. And I think that I've seen, a platform or outlet like mine being kind of included in something like SLO Film Festival at all. That's a change that I've never seen. And I've been on the coast for a long time and never seen that. So steps like that are huge. And then like seeing how many allies and how many people want to kind of contribute to change being made. That's also great. And I think the most heartening thing I've seen, and it might sound aggressive, but the most heartening thing I've seen is a lot of local Black youth being comfortable telling white people that it's not my job to tell you or to educate you on racism. If you really want to know about it, then educate yourself if you really care that much, you know what I'm saying? And that, I think, has sparked a lot of people actually. It's not only been in a sort of filter, kind of finding out who really does care and who really does want to take those steps, but it's also kind of, ignited a whole other wing of allies, I think. And that's something that's very new. But as far as what the news can do, I mean, for me, it's framing. I mean, it's framing, and it's framing, and it's necessarily like, I understand that everybody has an opinion. I personally don't believe that everybody's opinion needs to be heard if it's nonsense. You feel what I'm saying? Like, and the both sidesing of things. So like the both sidesing of things is huge. When you hear protesters that are burning masks, and then they're saying, well, we're doing this because people are saying that Black Lives Matter. Those two things are not the same. That's not. And a lot of times you see the media say, well, they say this and they say this, and there's no nuance, there's no context added to the conversation. And that is a huge problem, because it makes the people who are clearly wrong feel validated in their beliefs, because there is no context being added to the conversation. So I think that's something that all media can change to gain the trust of the public.
I love it. Just actually on our pre-call, we talked about these, I guess some folks are out drinking beer and celebrating St. Patrick's Day. And so, what does it mean to try to have to give them, or to attempt to give them, the same kind of understanding around why they're choosing to do that versus folks that are gathering together in protest over, police violence. So it's such a good point. And Karen, I can imagine it's tough, and yet, as Lord Sanctus said, it may sound aggressive. I'm like, how can truth telling sound aggressive, right? Like, or if it does, that's on you. Because one thing I talk about a lot in my work is I talk about truth telling and the importance of that. And people are always like, well, what do you mean by truth? And the answer is the non-dominant narrative. So the media has always given precedence and respect towards this dominant narrative, and that's why we all find ourselves in these positions. I want to hear the non-dominant narrative. I want to hear from the voices that have been otherized and marginalized. That's the only way we can tip the balance. It's certainly how media can show that you are trustworthy for us to share with you, but also that we're tipping the balance, so that these voices that haven't been heard can be heard. I'm going to have a moment. Oh, yes, please, Alisa. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Something the media can do better is diversify and be inclusive, so that stories can be told accurately. A lot of what we're seeing is very clickbaity as well. And we know that publications are struggling. They need people to see their articles. But when places aren't inclusive or diverse, then things happen where, for example, could be calling it the George Floyd trial for clickbait, or who's running the publication, whatever reason, is inaccurate and is an act of violence in that simple title, that clickbait title. So creating more inclusive spaces is imperative.
It's such a good point that, right, you can only, you know, no matter how objective you say you are as a journalist, if you don't reflect the experiences of the people you're speaking with, you are limited, right? So there's only so much objectivity you can have. We all have biases, but certainly we know that racial, you know, they're like racially, like white folks have not been racialized. And so they have this, you know, they're not so sure that they're a race, even though we all know they are. And so they tend to think that they're looking at these, you know, things from this race neutral perspective, and you're not. You're looking at things from a white perspective, and that's important to recognize. And it's also why it's important to have all different kinds of journalists that represent these different perspectives. Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I certainly want you all to have a chance to talk about how we can support your work and how those of us who are on the call today think about moving forward, what action steps can happen, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And of course, I've still got more questions if there aren't Q&A, but I hope you, the community, have questions. So this question is, can each of you touch on a moment of media that you feel like is this powerful example of how media can promote social justice? It can be global, it could be specific to your community, but a moment that you can point to say, this was a great use of media to promote social justice. And I'll just be quiet, and anybody who wants to chime in, chime in.
I'll just chime in really quickly with Black Lives Matter hashtag. It started with a hashtag, and it happened that the people who started the hashtag were very experienced organizers, and so had the infrastructure and the experience to actually build a movement off that. And so it didn't stay just a hashtag. And then locally, I do remember the first video that I was like, wow, was this I think his name is Xander, and it was the video. It was like a slow motion video where they isolated Tiana's vocals, Xander Bissell, and that was the first local piece of media that was like very well done, and I feel like it did just make the movement feel special and hype people up in a good way. And I'm sure there's many other examples. So I'll let other people respond.
That was going to be my answer too, Courtney.
Tell us more from your perspective, Elisa, just as a photo, you know, of someone who does photography, what about it maybe visually that worked for you? Or
yeah, there's so much. I was struggling to pick something, but Xander's video definitely stuck out. I think he'd be really embarrassed that we are naming him right now. He doesn't like to accept credit for things, but he did make this beautiful video. And then we were fortunate enough to collaborate with him and get his assistance on stuff. And there were some photos that actually he took on the front line when the protesters were being tear gassed and shot with rubber bullets. And those photos are so impactful and really intense. And so we've put out a couple of them on our platform, and we'll plan to release more. I'm just always so moved by pictures. Obviously, I love photojournalism, but just the rawness of it and the portrayal of reality and vulnerability is really captured in those moments, and is very clear, shows very clearly what was going on. So yeah, I feel fumbled because I'm like struggling to find more, because there's just so much. But I would say those pictures specifically, along with the video, are just really pull on your emotions in different ways, where the video is really uplifting and inspiring and encouraging. And then these pictures set you back a little bit, like, this is intense. And so.
Awesome, thank you. Lord and Karen, Lord Sanctus and Karen.
For me, it's a little more personal. I think that uh, early last year, I was working in Atascadero, and I'm usually like a hothead. Like if people approach me with negative energy and are just really in my space, invading my space, and up there was just like an insane amount of racism that I just could not have even really expected. And so I realized, like, if I want to keep this position, I have to figure out how to deal with it without becoming aggressive. And so in the midst of one of those moments happening, I caught myself and I was like, I'm just gonna film this. I'm just gonna film this guy going off. You know what I'm saying? And I said, he had called me the N-word, of course, and I started filming right after that. And he was in his work truck, so he had his phone number and his name on the side of the truck. And I was just like, you heard what he said? Here's his number, here's his name, hit him up. You know what I'm saying? And like that kind of showed me the power of media, because everybody on one side, people started, giving him bad Yelp reviews, and it really affected his business. And then on the other side, it showed me there were so many people that were kind of coming to his defense and making excuses for him, that like people that I see out regularly. And so it was just interesting in that way, but I never really, that was kind of the moment that made me be like, oh, there's kind of a little bit of power here that I got to be responsible with, basically.
Great. And Karen?
Yeah, I think Lord's Connect the Coast Instagram, Elisa's Community Roots Instagram. Last year we were on social media nonstop to understand the conversations, like I said a little bit earlier, the conversations, the going-ons of the protest demonstration events. I know we, like I said, we tag team. So if we weren't there, we were on social media seeing what people were saying, sharing. And in that way, sometimes even in the comments of posts from all of you, Race Matters as well, we would find individuals that would say, no, that didn't happen like that. And then I would reach out and say, okay, I would love to figure out, were you there? What did you see? And things like that. And that was a great way to, again, understand what people were feeling. What did they see? And it was powerful in the sense that the platforms themselves and the community that was following Community Roots, Connect the Coast, Race Matters, and that had their own groups on Facebook or on Instagram. It was powerful to see people talking, to see people sharing, feeling for one another, and also wanting to share with us. We were thankful and had the opportunity to connect with individuals that said, no, this didn't happen that way. I'm down to tell you about it. And just different things like that, and sharing video, because again, as much as I want to, I can't just take someone's word for it. I have to see, okay, please show me the video, show me the photo. Who can you send me to so I can verify that really happened? And things like that. So just the platforms themselves, the communities that all three of you have made, it's helped create informative and really important articles for us to put out into the community, again, to understand, to learn, to see what other people see, I think.
I love it. I'll just mention that historically, the civil rights movement coincided with in this country with people starting to have televisions in their living rooms, and that mattered, right? So that even white folks who may have been less empathetic to the movement started seeing people being brutalized by the police even back then at the time, as we know, right? And that mattered. And so the movement even kind of garnered allyship because people were actually now seeing this violence in their living rooms. And so I can't agree more that, and I'm grateful to, and I'm sure your community is grateful to all of you that are working to put your stories and the stories of others out there for people to see, no matter how you get it out there to them, whether it's traditional means, through a newspaper or on your Instagram accounts, etc. Towards the end, I'm going to have you all share a little bit of how people can support you and find you, but I'm going to go ahead and go to these amazing questions that are out here. Thank you so much, Grace, for sending these questions for me. Let's see. So Courtney and Elisa, can you talk a little bit about belonging and what you are working on for the edition of it?
Yes, thank you for asking that, because there are a lot of overlapping projects. I need reminders, like what's going on? So Belonging is coming back for its second year. It's a multimedia, multi-location experience that centers Black voices in a nutshell. Last year was our first year, and Renata Campbell's out there somewhere. She was our photographer. This year we have Eric Deshawn Lerma, an up and coming artist that we're really excited to feature, and Richard Facilo, who has an exhibit now at SLO, is mentoring Eric. Community Roots is doing amazing video work so that we can access a little QR code on some big portraits downtown, and see more of just the amazing, the participants this year, just more of their stories. And so We Are Here is the photography exhibit that will be around downtown. It will come alive and we won't have to enter a space and gather together to see the photos this year. Rhythms in Black is gonna be an exciting one. Some local DJs are curating playlists celebrating Black music, and we're gonna be asking businesses to play those soundtracks, and of course everyone at home can as well. And then lastly, Stories Matter, our live storytelling event, will be back. And so the participants don't know it yet, but they're going to be asked to also see if they want to tell a live story. And so it's a collaborative. It's awesome to be working with so many different creatives this year, and just moving along with the COVID challenges. And it's special because we did Belonging last year in February and had so much programming. COVID hit. We had this incredible year with the community kind of finally wrestling with race, and a lot of people wanting to center Black voices and support Black businesses. And so, which feels great, but it also feels great to have been doing that work before and being able to have more resources now to continue.
Great. Elisa, did you want to add anything?
We're just having a lot of fun teaming up with Race Matters and getting to film the behind the scenes. I've gotten to watch some of the edits and the cuts, and it's going to be really cool. So I just want to encourage everybody to really support that. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great things and working hard on it.
Great. There's a really good question about capitalism, which is, that connection between the dominant narrative and money, right? Or capital and capitalism. And so how can the media respond to, I think, kind of the weight of how capitalism is such a, kind of strong influence in the stories that we hear? So Karen, maybe you can start.
I can say that from a New Times perspective, we don't have subscribers. We're a completely free newspaper, and we do that because we have advertisements. So it was really hard for us last year because a lot of businesses canceled their advertising subscriptions because of COVID, which we completely understand. So in that sense, I don't feel that we're clickbaity maybe as other news outlets are, because again, we don't have to worry about clicks. We don't have to worry about making sure that people click on our links on Facebook, on the internet. We are free. You can walk around. We have our boxes. You can pick them up. So in that sense, we have a lot of freedom in how we write our stories. We, again, have a ton of conversations, even just about how to report or approach an event or an issue or what have you. So in that sense, I guess I don't have, it is a struggle. And I know that other people in the news industry do struggle with that. and maybe don't have a lot of say in their story once it's written and it's out of their hands. But in terms of New Times, again, we have such a great opportunity to have a lot of free reign in our stories and how we cover them, how we work with other communities, how we reach out to people. So I guess that's a perspective I can give, because I am not in a publication that is supported by subscription. So those are my 2 cents.
And I say that I mean, the democratization of our institutions, I feel like is happening in real time. But I think that needs people to kind of buy into that happening. So I think if people invest more in independent media outlets, there are so many out there. There's even local ones that can give you different perspectives. And I think that even if you yourself have a different perspective, it doesn't really cost you anything to put it out there and just see if someone gravitates towards it and see if you can add to the conversation. But I think the more people that get involved and do what Elisa was saying earlier and kind of take matters into their own hands and don't look at it as though, oh, they're on KSBY, they went to school for this, they did we do need that, and that is great, but we also need those on the ground perspectives as well. That's what kind of bolsters people power, and people power is literally the only thing that's going to change anything that we want changed. So that'd be my 2 cents.
Thank you. We're actually going to take a question for someone who would like to come on. So Santana, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Come on, and love those glasses. We all got it. We all got to get, yes, sister. Okay, but please ask your question.
Hi, yes, it's Santina, and it's nice to meet everybody. And I have a film at the festival called Full Picture, which is a short doc, which does deal with bias and unconscious bias and sort of implicit bias too. It's about disability, because I have a spinal cord injury. I'm in a wheelchair, but the cool thing is you would not know that from looking at me now, but you would know that from if you ran into me in the store. And it's like, you know, in quarantine, I'm able to like trick people that I'm not a minority, but I really am. So I guess something that you had mentioned, Elisa, that I, you know, was a phrase you used was inclusive spaces. And I think you're talking about mental barriers and things like that, which resonates, but also there are these physical barriers when we're dealing with disability, right? And I know that like I'm hyper focused on disability, but I'm also trying to incorporate sort of everybody's thing, you know, because all of us who are minorities, we have to be inclusive, all inclusive. But sometimes I feel like disability gets left out because it's like, because it's such a physical thing, it's harder to like, you know, it's harder than just getting over the mental barrier. You have to make changes, physical changes, whatever. So I was wondering, how have you guys, since you're really in it, you're in the thick of it, right? Have you seen any of this, encountered it? And if so, how are you, you know, how are you dealing with that? Because it's a world that you don't really know, right? If you don't have disabilities, I don't know. So how are you dealing with fighting for everybody when you're also, you know, dealing with worlds that you don't know? You know what does it make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're talking about intersectionality here, right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
within being marginalized, there are, depending on your identity, you know, there are several or many different ways in which you can be marginalized. I'll quickly say there are lots of disabilities that are not physical and not visible, and that's important to name and uplift as well. And I'll also say that just in the same way that people with disabilities often tend to be marginalized within abled communities, Black and Brown people are marginalized within the disability community. So one of the things, right? And so one of the things we're all saying as we look at intersectionality is, look, if you're going to fight for your rights from a perspective that not, you know, that's not the non-dominant narrative, we expect you to be fighting for the marginalized folks within that identity category as well. So I wanted to just respond in that way. But would anyone else? Actually, it's a good question in terms of the media, in terms of these protests. Have you seen efforts being made to make them accessible for people with physical disabilities?
I think that's somewhere where we could improve. I think there have been, I think there has been more of an awareness, and there are activists out there who remind us every now and then and center that, whether it's in planning protests or in we're talking about social media, but posting and bringing that attention back, like, hey, we need to talk about ableism and accessibility. And so I think that our activist community, I think that's one area where we could improve, and activism is always, or it should always be evolving. And so
I'll take a moment to
Yeah.
name that we should have a sign language interpreter for this panel, right? So just in the same way that we're doing land acknowledgements, we are all, I can certainly say on this call with these panelists, these are folks that are always pushing to evolve. And this work, this social justice work is never ending. It is always about, what's the next marginalized perspective, non-dominant narrative that we have not included in what we're looking at. I'm going to move to another question, but thank you so much, Santina. That was great and important. Yes. And so we are going to go, I'm going to take, I think, just one more, because then, as I've said about 5 times, I want to give you all an opportunity to talk about how we can support your work and what you're doing next. So the question is, what are the pros and cons of social media? Look, we could just name one big ass one right now, is that Trump had access to Twitter. I can say that, okay, right? Like, we just named that one, but how about some other pros and cons to social media?
I think a pro has been that this has been largely a youth-led movement, nationwide, worldwide, and they've always got their phones in their hands. Most people do. And so the being constantly connected, social media locally has captured, or people with their phones have captured, a lot of incidences that are currently being talked about in court. Because multiple people have been charged unjustly with misdemeanors and whatnot, but there's that proof, and that has been shared on social media. And I think sharing that puts a lot of pressure, helps open people's eyes, really calls things to attention. And it's definitely impacted us locally, which tends to be pretty, it's easy to close yourself off if you're not, if you're within the dominant culture. But when it's right in your face on your phone and everyone's sharing it, that certainly makes an impact. I'll say cons of where would you, what, social media or media? I feel like I'm social or media. Yeah. Lack of representation is a con, spreading misinformation so easily. Also, because of the lack of representation, there's a lot of things that get perpetuated that keep people feeling left out or insecure. I feel like I'm losing my train of thought.
No, that's great. Anyone else want to chime in? Pros and cons?
I'll say, to me, that question, respectfully, that question is like asking what are the pros and cons of hammers. You feel what I'm saying? Like, social media is a tool, and I feel like all the cons come from human nature, which, I mean, we all have to deal with. But I do feel like the pros I see are connectivity, and that is something that can change the world. Being able to get a thought across the world instantly is insane. I mean, and then I think, like, I mean, I could dive deep into it, but there's a whole virtual world of virtual equity that will translate into the real world that's really coming into fruition right now. If you take a look at it, like NFTs and things like that, that are gonna also change the world. So I think that, I mean, the tool itself is definitely helping humanity. I think that if we work on ourselves, those cons will become a lot less apparent. But we, so often want to blame other things than ourselves. So that's what I think.
We're gonna wrap up with, where can we find you? Tell us your, all of your socials, where we can find you, or how to read your work, and how can we support you most importantly. So Karen, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Courtney, we'll go to Elisa, and we'll finish up with the fabulous Lord Sanctus.
Definitely. We're always saying, I know the trust thing is very, very important. So reach out. you can email us at news@newtimeslo.com, or me personally, I'm always wanting to cover the community. I want to understand what everyone's thinking, feeling. And I also advocate so much as a Mexican young woman in a very predominantly white community. When I first came here, for Cal Poly, I looked around and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm in a snow globe. It was just so different coming from Southern California. And when I stayed here to be part of New Times, I think the biggest thing I wanted to do was, which I still don't feel that I do enough of, is cover our communities of different ethnicities, our marginalized communities, because while they may or may not be small, they're there, and we just don't have enough of that coverage in our papers or in our news media outlets. So please reach out, have a conversation with me. Again, it's kgarcia@newtimeslo.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on social media, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, whatever, find me. I'm always more than happy to sit down and talk, and I want to know what everyone's thinking and feeling a lot. So thank you.
Awesome. Courtney?
Hey, so Race Matters Slow's on Instagram. It's Race Matters Slow, 2 S's, and then our website's racematterslow.org. And stay tuned for lots of exciting projects. And a way you can support is by honoring it's not an honor, it's sad, but Breonna Taylor was murdered a year ago today. And shout out to our local Black Lives Matter community action, and especially Reagan had a big part in pushing for doing the event today. So shout out to Reagan, and we all have time, locals, we can end the panel and we can get there to the visual. And I think that's it. And Santina, I just watched her movie like an hour ago. So she gave her comment and I was like starstruck. So another shout out.
I'll say very quickly, because I hadn't mentioned it yet, you should absolutely leave this panel and go to Mitchell Park for a 5:30 vigil for Breonna Taylor. But I'll have Elisa and Lord Sanctus share how we can support you.
We have our website, which is a work in progress, but there's still information there at communityrootsproject.com. You can follow us on Instagram at communityroots.project. We'll be working on some stuff with Race Matters, and we recently were approved for fiscal sponsorship. So look out for ways to, thank you, to support us financially so we can help out our team and continue to do the storytelling that we're hoping to do.
And we're going to be in touch, Elisa. And Lord Sanctus.
You can follow us on Instagram and hit the link in our bio, and it'll have all the platforms that we're on. It's our link tree. But I definitely want to encourage people on here to not just look at the platforms, because I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people I think might get confused, is that if you're looking at our platform, that's support, and it's not. And I'm going to speak for myself, not anyone else, but that's not really support. I post about 100 different creatives or more from around the area. And even though my followers have increased throughout this protest, their support hasn't increased. You feel what I'm saying? And the only posts that really go viral for us is the racial posts with racism and things like that. And sometimes it starts to feel like racism porn, and I don't want that. So I want you to come to my platform, find somebody from the community and support them like you would support a Drake, like you would support Chris Brown, or whoever you like. You know what I'm saying? I don't know who you.
We don't support him. He's an abuser. But anyway, sorry.
Sorry, but whoever you support, that's a mainstream artist. Support a local artist like you would support them. And that's what I hope you would find from my platform. Shout out to Michelle, I see you. Shout out to all the youth and the youth out here that are protesters. Hit me up. And if you guys need me to promote anything you're doing and get the word out, I'm down to do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, SLO Film Fest. As Lord Sanctus said, this is huge that you are adding these kinds of panels to your film fest. It is a show of allyship. It is a show of understanding that these are the important non-dominant narrative voices in your communities. And most importantly, thank you so much to all of you who do this important work. It is risky, it is courageous. I know you're not asking for cookies, but you should get cookies and more, and obviously funding, Alisa, for what you do. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep doing it. You've got support, and go to that go to the vigil. Sorry, everybody, right now, Mitchell Park, 5:30 for Breonna Taylor. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Okay. Bye-bye.